All right. Here we are once again. Chapters 8 to 10. Hopefully everybody got through it. A lot going on now. Things are getting really weird, very slippery. Um, a quick word about last week and the ending of the session in which this thing, okay, so this is a shot from my copy of the book. And it turns out I learned from you guys that this is actually a misprint in my copy. Um, so there's this, as you can see, removing the plastic disc from its place. That paragraph is out of place in my copy. And to make it worse, I have both an EPUB and a PDF copy. I read the EPUB on my Kindle, and they both have the same mistake, but they also came together. So I think what happens sometimes is that people make uh, a PDF into an EPUB or vice versa. And so they both have the mistake. And it's funny too, because as I said, I read this book a long time ago. I remember it getting wild and confusing. Um, and it's funny that this misplaced paragraph, I kind of just accepted it as the style, of the writing. There's this genre of response that you'll find these days in the media when somebody produces an obviously fake headline as a joke, something like an Onion headline, and then somebody will pick it up in earnest saying, "Can you believe this?" And then when they get caught out by that fact, they do this response where they're like, "Sure, okay, it's a fake headline, but it really says something about society that I believed it." And that's kind of what's happening here. It really says something about the Philip K. Dick writing that I believed it. Um, so yeah, this is out of place, and I guess it's a bit of a spoiler. Um, but rest assured, don't worry, folks, it won't be totally resolved. Okay, so let's get into it. Um, our little advertising blurb at the beginning. If money worries have you in the cellar, go visit the lady at Ubik Savings and Loan. She'll take the frets out of your debts. Suppose, for example, you borrow 59 postgrads on an interest-only loan. Let's see that adds up to. There's something I want to talk about at some point. Maybe not right away, but just to get you thinking about it. Isn't there always something weird about the wording of these things, of these ads? If money worries have you in the cellar, go visit the lady. I don't know. That you'll see. I'll point
It's
it
our
out when I have.
future.
Sorry?
It's our future to save money on the seller.
Right. You're in the cellar because that's the only place you can afford. It's the cellar. Um, no, it just really struck me this time that it's not totally, I don't know, it's not wrong. It's just a little off, you know? It's just not quite right. It's as though they hired, an AI or an alien to write copy for these for Ubik. Because the wording is just a little bit weird in every case. There's always something. I mean, of course, there's the obvious interest only loan. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about though. Um, I'll point it out in the future when it pops up again. So yeah, an interest only loan. So that's what a lot of students have these days, where they can't even pay anything beyond the interest of their student loans. Uh,
The it seems well, it seems as though it's current, even though this is written in the 80s or so. This is current insofar as we wouldn't know interest only, or at least Americans wouldn't, if it weren't for the 2007-8 financial crisis, the housing
yeah,
boom and bust, and now, you know. So I don't know. It seems remarkably prescient. And the wording to me, only just strikes me as excessive parody of what advertising
I thought
is.
so too. And I guess he's trying to keep a light touch on it. And that's why it just seems slightly off because he doesn't want it to be too on the nose. So yeah, I mean that's a possibility. Um, on the other hand, there are plenty of cases that really seem just totally on the nose. And by the way, it's originally published in 69, not the 80s even. So like even more so. Yeah. Um, but okay. Let's go ahead and get started here. So at the beginning of our chapter, we find Joe in his hotel room, looking at these drapes. I liked this as a just first line because there's a little bit more to it than you might get at first blush. Um, so he's looking at these drapes with a silkscreen that depicted man's ascent from unicellular organisms of the Cambrian period to the first heavier than air flight at the beginning of the 20th century. It's a nice touch here to add or to include flight as part of the evolutionary picture, because that's actually a conscious intervention by the species, you know? It's not as if we were saying, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and evolve to, walk upright, or like we weren't intervening in any way, but then like we reached this point where we can make these kinds of interventions. And some people would say, well, that's not evolution, that's just a kind of, progress of another sort. But no, this is including that as a picture of evolution. I mentioned, I think maybe in session 0, that transhumanists are the extrapists. That's kind of a feature of that realm of thought where a part of their belief, I don't know about system, a part of their philosophy is that mankind reaches a point at which those interventions are not just possible, but they're sort of our responsibility. Like we should take them on. We should make these interventions even into DNA, like going that far. Okay. So yeah, interesting that they included. So from the unicellular organism to the first airplane flight. He dials for room service, or he picks up the phone and he immediately hears the voice of Runsiter saying, "Pay him back if at all possible." The receiver declared. First, of course, it has to be established whether Stanton Mick was actually involved himself or a mere homo simulacric substitute was in action against us. So he gets Runsiter's voice talking about paying him back as in getting revenge. Just speaking sort of to himself, one way. Bolasang arrives at the hotel. He seems very upset. "I don't understand it, Mr. Chip. We worked all night in relays. We're just not getting a single spark." So just to remind you, if you're not sure, they're still trying to revive Runsiter to be in Half-Life, and they're not having any luck in that. We ran an electroencephalograph, and the gram shows faint but unmistakable cerebral activity. So the afterlife's there, but we still can't seem to tap it. So things are not working out, getting Runsiter into Half-Life, unfortunately. We called Mr. Hammond in New York. Oh, he asks, "How did you, know to contact me here?" Vogelsang. And Vogelsang says, "We contacted Mr. Hammond. When I tried to call you, your phone has been busy all morning." Joe says, "Yeah, it's broken." This is interesting. Okay, how come he doesn't immediately tell him that he hears Runsiter on the phone? It seems like a pretty big omission considering that Vogelsang is the guy in charge of trying to communicate with Runsiter. it seems like a really strange thing to leave out. And this is going to come up again. So I was thinking about this over this last week. It's not the first time that it seems like people's reasoning is very shaky. And you're like, why didn't they do this? And I'm reminded of a description of being in the half-life where people are in a bit of a haze. So maybe that's it. Because it seems like that would be the first thing you would say to Vogelsang. Hey, actually, Runsitter's on the phone right now. I mean, that seems pretty important. Not, oh, the phone's broken.
I thought part of it was just that Joe Chip in specific is kind of a ding dong. Like if you remember the movie Back to the Future with Michael
Mhm.
J. Fox,
Yeah.
in that movie, he's got a time machine. He sets the time he wants to go to. He goes back to that time period and then proceeds to spend the next 2/3 of the movie wondering, why is the world so different? Why are people acting so
Right.
strange? How come the cars look different? How come the clothing looks different? How come the prices are lower? And it's like,
Mm.
you're a ding dong. You just set up to go back to that time zone. And I thought Joe is kind of like that too. Like he lives in a world where Half-Life is a reality, and he's got a boss who has been contacting Ella for decades now, but he
Mhm.
just he's very uh, um, self-absorbed and kind of narcissistic. Like he just
Yeah.
thinks, yeah, Hammond, not Hammond, Runsiter was yammering on about something, but who knows what.
Right. But I mean, they just had this huge traumatic experience. I didn't think of the ding dong angle. My two theories, my two theories were either he's too paranoid, so he doesn't want to ever really show all of his cards or really, say what's going on. And
He
the
is
other,
paranoid.
he
Yeah,
is.
that
That becomes more
that
and more
matches
pronounced.
with the whole, how do I know it's really Hammond?
Hmm.
And is he the one with the teeth? And
Right.
so could be that, yeah.
So I was thinking either that or it's kind of played for laughs, maybe. You know what I mean? You could see it in a movie scene, like, yeah, it's broken, and kind of like maybe even looks at the camera, and the audience goes, "Aha, I know what he's talking about." I
Uh,
don't know. Yeah,
I was going to say that the first thought would be that he would be embarrassed to provide this information, but I'm going to go with Kamari's statement that he's more of a dingbat
yeah. Could be a little of
and
each.
paranoid.
Yeah, paranoid dingbat. Could be that too. So, Joe sets about again borrowing postcreds from now Vogelsang. Can I get some postcreds so I can eat breakfast? He says, Mr. Hammond warned me you would try to borrow money from me. He informed me that he already provided you with sufficient funds to pay for your hotel room, plus a round of drinks, as well as one thing about Joe is he's okay, he sometimes reveals himself not to be a dingbat at all. This is not the first time, nor will it be the last, that he gets into a rationalization, a little rant. Like he rationalized how Al needed to lend him money because not, if you think about it, you're my employee now, and so on and so on. He rationalized in the elevator why they came up first and left the other people below. He's always doing this thing, and he even said it out loud after that. He said, "I'm rationalizing my decision." Because it's like I feel bad about it, so I need to have this cushion of rationality. Uh, so yeah, he immediately starts rationalizing to Vogelsang as to why you need to give him some money. So yeah, Al, he based his estimate on the assumption that I wouldn't get such a nice room. He didn't think everything through. However, nothing smaller than this was available. Al did not foresee this. You can add it onto the state. So and another thing, you can add it onto the statement, which we'll be presenting to Runsitter Associates at the end of the month. I am, as Al probably told you, now the director of the firm. You're dealing with a positive thinking, powerful man here. And then he kind of lies, who has worked his way step by step to the top. Right.
I think he's lying about the room too. I think there's probably
Oh,
other ones
sure.
available, but he has
Yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
pattern of always buying the best of the best, and also a pattern of nobody ever gets to eat anything, even though he had real coffee, not ersatz coffee at the beginning, and he offered to make it for Pat. As I recall, nobody in this whole book has eaten anything yet.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think he probably is lying about the room, and you know, who knows what else he got into the night before. Uh, so yeah. Uh, Vogelsang says, "Hey, let's go back to the moratorium. Mr. Hammond suggested I take you back to the moratorium so that you have enough time to confer with Ella. Of course, Ella is the second in command at the firm. She needs to be consulted." Uh, this is where he gets into that paranoid line of questioning, which I didn't print the whole thing. I didn't copy the whole thing here. Are you sure it was him? Was he dressed like this? Did he give you any code words? I mean, you know, he's seeing
That's
this,
so dumb, because if they were code words, it wouldn't have been a very good code if Vogel
right?
said,
Yeah, yeah,
yes,
he told me. Yeah, he told me this was the code word. Um, so yeah, that would be silly. But you know, that's what I'm saying. Like I don't know if he's totally a dingbat. Like he can really do those rationalities. He seems like just a guy who hustles all the time. You know, that's. By the way, for my Serbian people here, somebody who hustles. Okay, there's a really popular British television show here in Serbia from way back in the day. It's called Only Fools and Horses, and it's I think it's from all the way back in the 70s, but even up to the 90s. It went on forever. And the main two characters are these guys who are always hustling. They get up, they're always like they've got some knockoff watches and they're going to sell them and then they're going to go get this and they've always got a plan. It's a comedy show and it's pretty funny, although it's a bit formulaic. So that's what hustling means. Uh what's the oh man, what's the word in Serbian? It's the title of the show. It's like mu, muche? I can't remember now.
Mućke.
Muchke, that's right. Muchke. It's like hustles. Um, so yeah, that's Joe. He seems like he's kind of always hustling. And it's funny because hustling here means having change in your pocket so that you're free. And you're drinking nice coffee. That's also a feature of the characters on Only Fools and Horses. They're always like, only the best, Rodney, you know, trying to drink champagne every night, but they're in the lower working class. You know, they really haven't made it into the middle class.
There is also next year, in this time, we will be billionaires.
Yeah,
Millionaires.
yeah. This time next year, Rodney. Yeah, it's funny. So yeah, then he tells Vogelsang about Runsutter on the phone, finally. And Vogelsang says, really? How unusual. Then he goes over to listen, and Joe charges him. Always hustling. See, he's always hustling. Oh, you want to hear the disembodied voice of the dead man that you can't rouse? That'll cost you one postcred. And Joe is ethical about it because when Vogelsang gets on the phone and finds, oh, by the way, Vogelsang's airplane propeller beanie whirred irritably as he handed the coins to Joe. That's just funny. He's wearing a beanie. Guys, if you don't know what a beanie is, it's a little cap, and this one has an airplane propeller on the top. You may have seen it in cartoons, but this apparently is an actual fashion. So again, we've got this very eclectic look. And the beanie,
without a brim, little
yeah,
kids, and then it has the spinner top on top. I think
yeah,
in the Jetsons, didn't Elroy wear a hat like that? It was like a
I think
50s
so.
Elroy.
By the way, did you know it's really funny you should bring that up. If you look on the Wikipedia, because somebody pointed this out.
Today is George Jetson's birthday.
Today is George Jetson's birthday. That's the canon. So he's somewhere right now being born. Anyway, yeah, the beanie that apparently is a mood beanie that whirs irritably. Like you get annoyed and the beanie starts whirring. It's like a cat angrily shaking its tail. Don't get too close to him. He's very irritable. Look at his beanie. So he says, I'm only charging you what they charge for a cup of coffee. This ought to be worth at least that. And yeah, when Vogelsang hears nothing, just a little static, Joe ethically hands the money back to him. This is really funny. Oh, you didn't hear the voice? Well, that's just not right. I'll return your postcard. But yeah, just a far off static from thousands of miles away. That's what Vogelsang hears when he tries to use the phone. Then it's mentioned that a girl came to the hotel the night before, and he does not remember this. So he says, yeah, all but the girl who spent the night with you. You guys have been seeing the okay, sorry, I got some weird message from Zoom just now that suddenly said that you guys can see my application, which is the Zoom that I'm sharing. So presumably you've been seeing it this whole time. Okay. Um so yeah, Vogelsang says, "Where's the girl? Isn't she here? Which girl was it?" Joe asked, his morale already low, plunged into the blackest depths of his mind. Mr. Hammond didn't say. He assumed you'd know. It would have been indiscreet for him to tell me her name, considering the circumstances. Didn't she? Nobody showed up. Which had it been, Pat Conley or Wendy? He prowled about the hotel room, reflexively working off his fear. This didn't make any sense to me, so I was going to ask you guys. I hope to God, he thought, that it was Pat. Why would you hope that? Isn't he kind of terrified of Pat at this point? In fact, they made a big show of how he's not going to be able to just leave her after.
Okay, let me check my book and see if that was a misprint too.
Wow, that would be funny. I'm gonna have to burn this one if it's a misprint. I need to go
wait
find
a second.
Mm-hmm.
If the person didn't show, and he has choice of it being Wendy or Pat, he seems to really like Wendy and he's afraid of Pat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that this is sort of a weird, that
Okay, I think I know where you're going. Yeah.
the wish of who didn't show you'd want to be Pat
Right.
in the subjective sense. Pat was searching for you and didn't find you. Whew.
I
As
got
opposed
you.
to
Yeah.
if Wendy searched for you, you
Yeah,
want her.
that makes sense. And it was Pat. I hope to God he thought that it was Pat. So yeah, I think it's what Ajit said, that
I hope,
if the
yeah,
person
yeah.
did not show up, it's better that it's Pat.
Or if something happened to the person who did show up, I hope it's not Wendy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, he's safe.
This is like that joke that I mentioned last week or the week before about the coffee. Sorry, we don't have cream. You'll have to have no milk. You know, like you'll have to have no Pat. Like Pat. I hope it's Pat that did not show up.
Right.
Yeah.
Double negative is a no-no.
I think a more straightforward way of saying that, because that's like a double negation, is to say, I hope it's not Wendy that showed up. You know, because I don't remember seeing her and I like her, or something like that. At least it just seems more straightforward to me. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense now. Thank you.
Well, he's reflexively working off his fear, so I guess his immediate fear was like, oh my God, was it Pat? And then he's realizing she's not there.
Yeah. Yeah, and then all the more so after this next scene, he would really wish it was Pat. Because in the closet, they find a just mummified pile of shreds of cloth and some, bones in pretty much mummified state. Vogelsang says that's old, like completely dried out, been here for centuries. I'll go tell the manager. And it turns out to be Wendy Wright in the closet, long deceased. So yeah, a terrible discovery in the closet. Then we switch back to New York. At the headquarters, the other inertials are sitting around the conference table. Al says Joe should be back any time now. His watch appears to have stopped. They're all going through these similar weird events, these emanations. The list has been made: stale cigarettes, out-of-date phone book, obsolete money, putrefied food, ad on match folder. I'm going to pass this list around the table once more, he says. See if this time anyone can spot a connective link between these five, or whatever occurrences, or whatever you want to call them. These 5 things that are wrong, says John Ild. Pat says, it's easy to see the connection between the first 4, but not the match folder. It doesn't fit in. So we don't know exactly what they're talking about right away. Then we get the description of the match book. And here's what it says. Amazing opportunity for advancement to all who can qualify. Mr. Glenn Runseter of the Beloved Brethren Moratorium of Zurich, Switzerland, doubled his income within a week of receiving our free shoe kit with detailed information as to how you also can sell our authentic simulated leather loafers to friends, relatives, business associates. Mr. Runseter, although helplessly frozen in cold pack, earned 400 POS creds. I added the last part because it's interrupted in no time at all, just to make it make sense. So there's an advertisement in which Runseter is in cold pack, still working at building a fortune, selling shoes, apparently. So what do you think, Al? A gag by Runseter? Did he have them printed up before his death, or maybe Hollis as sort of a joke, knowing he was going to kill Runseter? That by the time we noticed the match folder, Runseter would be in cold pack in Zurich, like the match folder says. Tito Apostos says, how would Hollis know we'd take Runseter to Zurich? And Don says, because Elle is there. So they're all in pursuit of this mystery. It's not clear how this could be possible. What's the matter, Sam? Says Al. Oh, so this is after Sam is tossed a coin to start up the TV, so they can see whether Runseter's death is on the news, maybe get some clarity. Then Sam asks, isn't Walt Disney's head supposed to be on the 50-cent piece? Either Disney's or the older one, Fidel Castro's. So this is definitely an alternate history. So they take a look at the coin. It's got Glenn Runseter on it. Al said to all of them seated around the table, it's Runseter. So they have the matchbook, they have the coin. How can this be? Pat says, I see 2 processes here. One is of deterioration, and one, I'm not quite sure, something to do with Runseter. We should look at all of our other coins and paper money, and then they all take out their money, and it turns out a number of them have Runseter money, also on paper, not just coins. Then Don speculates, you know what I think? I think these processes are going in opposite directions. So this is what we were touching on about the phone book, but so I was saying, I don't think the phone book is on the other side of this. One is going away, going out of existence. This gets even more complicated later, by the way, when we start getting an old car, but it's in brand new condition. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Going out of existence, that's process 1. The second process is a coming into existence, but of something that's never existed before. So it's kind of de facto from the future. I mean, if you want to put it into this binary where the other things are going into the past, these other things are not precedented. They have no previous example of these things, the Runseter money. So it's kind of from the world of potential things. Maybe we shouldn't even say it's from the future, though. But everything's very slippery. Some things seem to be falling forward in time, others seem to be falling backward in time. Joe arrives at the office. He looked 100 years older than when Al had last seen him. In my office, Joe turned away from the table. He blinked, hesitated. Oh, this is when he's showing the remains of Wendy, but he says, I don't think you should that you should look. It's rather shocking. The man from the moratorium was with me when I found her. He said he couldn't do anything. It had been too long, years. This is, of course, shocking to Al, and I don't think they tell everybody, actually. This is just him talking to Al. Joe talks about hearing Runciter on the phone, so that's another manifestation. Vogel saying he tried to hear him, that's the he. All he got was silence and static. From a long way off, nothing, the sound of nothing. A very strange sound. I don't like that, Al said. He wasn't sure why. I'd feel better about it if Vogelsang had heard it too. So they're trying to corroborate the, their possible hallucinations with people who were not in the accident. So that's the figuring here. Vogelsang, if he had heard it, that would mean that somebody not in the explosion heard it. And so we could be sure it wasn't a hallucination on your part, or for that matter, on all our parts, as in the case of the match folder. Everybody sees the match folder. I don't know why they don't make use of I don't think that the lawyer, there's a lawyer present. I didn't really put him up here. He's the company's legal representative. They could have asked him about the match folder, I guess. Yes, Vasilio.
It's interesting how Joe reacts when you mentioned the Vogelsang. He said that some girl was at his room, and he then feared. He wanted to be pet that girl because he was feared from her, but he also likes Wendy. But when he finds out that Wendy is dead, he doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And, also, he now meets Pat. She's with Al, but he doesn't say anything.
Yeah, I think they do mention something like perhaps we shouldn't tell everybody about Wendy yet. But you're right. His reaction to Wendy. Now it does say that he's been tranquilized on the way over while they were taking the trip to New York. They chartered a ship and the ship had tranquilizers. And he says, I feel okay, but I think it's the tranquilizers. Maybe it'll hit me when it. But yeah, it seems like he would be in a bit more of a state finding a desiccated corpse like that in his hotel room. And also figuring that she probably made it into the room. Like there was some evidence that she had gone down the hallway like that. They found something in the hallway. I can't remember the exact wording. So apparently she slipped in quietly and then went into the closet to die by herself. Yeah, I have been thinking, but everybody's a bit cold and callous in this story. There's nobody who's particularly, I don't know, sensitive or like touchy-feely. Everybody's very kind of cold and detached, it seems.
Yeah, earlier in one of our other meetings, I had brought up this idea. I like Pat's idea that there's two different things at work here, and I had suggested like entropy is one, everything disintegrating down to the other, and then the opposite of entropy, attraction. And nobody is very loving. Nobody is very attracted in this story. They all seem to kind of be struggling with that. And it did, I know language changes over time. So it did kind of make me feel weird the first time I heard the phrase mistress used in this story. But as I continued reading, I just had to tell myself, I think given the time period, all it means is girlfriend.
Yeah.
Whereas in our nowadays time, to be someone's mistress, it's more commonly used that the person has a partner already and you're the side hustle. Right. But I think what Dick was getting at in his time period was it was so unusual back then for two people unmarried to live together.
Yeah.
Didn't have a good word, and boyfriend girlfriend sounded like what you called your teenage friend. He wanted an adult word to use. So yeah. Mistress is what it is, and yeah, I guess saying that's your partner, then then one person has a partner, and that was Joe, but his partner Pat is horrible to him. So
yeah,
so nobody has a loving relationship.
Yeah, and we don't It's almost implied that there could be some kind of legally binding marriage between him and Pat. He at least questions that. I wonder what the legal status is after the workings of Pat's magic. Like, are we now married? She has the ring and she's decided to keep that. So yeah, this next slide, this is something else that we talked about, how, well, there are some things that can't be hallucinations because they involve physical objects and machines. So yeah, the machines reject the coins, objective machines geared to react to physical properties. No psychological elements came into play there. Machines could not imagine. So there's something definitely not a hallucination or not a totally subjective experience. Unless everything is a totally subjective experience. That's the solipsism that we talked about before. So Al says, I'm leaving this building for a while. Think of a city or town at random, one that none of us have anything to do with, where none of us ever go or have ever gone. Baltimore, says Joe randomly. I'm going to Baltimore then, fine. I'm going to see if a store picked at random will accept Runcitor currency. Buy me some cigarettes, says Joe. So they head off to Baltimore. First we have, for chapter 9, our advertising blurb. My hair is so dry, so unmanageable. What's a girl to do? Simply rub in creamy Ubik hair conditioner. In just 5 days, you'll discover new body in your hair, new glossiness. And Ubik hairspray, used as directed, is absolutely safe. Very convincing. This one isn't as off as some of the others. Those advertisers, they try to make the blurbs sound like a natural spoken English. So this, you'll discover new body in your hair, new glossiness, also seems to be a reference to, well, we haven't in these chapters seen Ubik at work yet, but well, you'll see. Spraying Ubik into your hair and finding new body, new glossiness. It's as if it's been renewed. Okay, so yeah, they go to the Lucky People supermarket on the periphery of Baltimore. At the counter, Al says to the computerized checker, give me a pack of Pall Malls. Wings are cheaper, says Joe. Irritated, Al says they don't make wings anymore. They haven't for years. This is funny. They do make them, but they don't advertise. It's an honest cigarette that claims nothing. Just, it got me thinking, maybe there are secret products out there that nobody knows about because they don't advertise. And the reason is that they're honest products that claim nothing. The board of directors, they're suspicious of making a big profit for the product. They'd rather be honest and take a loss. That's why you don't hear about them as big movers on the stock market. Isn't there the story of the guy who runs Costco or one of the big markets where he refuses to increase the price of hot dogs, even though the board of directors is like, you have to charge more than $1. And he's like, never. I will go to my grave never charging more than $1 for the hot dogs. This is some big store in the States. So yeah, there's a secret menu of items in the world that do not advertise. It's an honest cigarette that claims nothing. To the checker, he says, change that from Pall Malls to wings. So they use the Runcitor money. It works. Okay. Wow. So Runcitor money is apparently legal tender for some transactions. They get out of the way of the next customer, a heavy-set old lady wearing blueberry-colored cloth coat and carrying a Mexican rope shopping bag.
I wanted to say something about that lady, but before we go too far away from the wings, I had never heard of wings cigarettes, so I looked it up online, and there was a company, they made cheapo cigarettes, and they had this radio program called The Wings of Destiny. So I just thought
That really rings a bell.
From Philip K. Dick's point of view, maybe that was just an extra little funny metaphor he could put in there, you know, wings of
Yeah.
destiny.
I wonder if this is where Paul McCartney got the name for that other band that he was in.
The other thing is, in the hotel, they had pictures of the one-celled organism getting all the way to a plane. And so
Right.
Wings was a Depression era cigarette, apparently. That's why I never heard of it. And I guess he's right. It was always the off brand, the cheap brand.
Yeah.
But they decided as an advertising gimmick to have trading cards in their cigarettes, and they were different airplanes because it was called Wings. So
Okay.
I don't know that there's actually any hidden meaning, but I do think it's a motif thing being.
Sometimes hidden meanings emerge and they're not necessarily even the author's intention, and that's okay. Yeah, if it's a Depression era cigarette, I mean, what are you going to choose? Wings or Miner's Misery? The two brands that were available. The one sounds so hopeful. Go ahead.
Later on, Joe deduces that he could fly somewhere. Like,
Oh yeah. When he's trying to get to wherever, I forgot the city now.
Des Moines.
Des Moines, yeah.
Right. And maybe he thinks of it because in his subconscious mind, he saw the picture of the first airplane and realizes if it's before year X, I can't remember what year it was, but he knew what year it was, then I can get there by airplane.
Right.
And he smokes wings. Maybe even had a trading cards. He might have a propensity. He might like planes.
Right. Yeah, that could be. So yeah, the cigarettes are, as per usual, totally dried up and they crumble between his fingers. So they're old, as we have grown to expect. Meanwhile, behind them, the heavy-set old lady in the dark coat is arguing with the automatic checker. It was dead. By the time I got it home, she says, here, you can have it back. She set a pot on the counter. It contained a lifeless plant, perhaps an azalea. In its moribund state, it showed few features. So it's spreading. Other people are being affected. She purchased a plant, and it was dead by the time she got home.
That's what I wanted to say. I was wondering when I first read this, and Dick always carefully explains what everyone's wearing, and they're always wearing crazy clothes. My first thought was, we never knew if Miss Wirt was killed in that blow up as well. And I was like, most of the people in this new reality that they're wandering around in just are doing their lives and nothing. But this was the first person that I thought, if they're dead, was also having the same kind of response that our main characters are having, which is like, why are things changing? Why are things disintegrating?
Right.
But when I went back and read the description of Miss Wirt, there's no evidence that it's actually her. There's no triangle glasses. She's not wearing the same clothes. So,
right.
Okay, maybe it's not Miss Wirt, but I think it's evidence that there's some people in this new reality that are actually people, and some people that are just like, I don't know what I'd say, figments of their imagination or projections or something like that.
Yeah, phantasmagoria.
Yeah, there you
go. So yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about Mrs. Wirt, but it does kind of remind me of her. And maybe if she was completely unaware of all the intrigue that was going on, then this is just her other regular life where she's buying plants at the store. If she was a complete innocent, completely unaware, and then, killed in the blast, this is her regular life. But it's a good observation. So the checker says, I can't give you a refund. No warranty goes with plant life, which we sell. Buyer beware is our rule. There it is again. Please move along. Caveat emptor. And the Saturday Evening Post, she says, that I picked up from your newsstand, it was over a year old. What's the matter with you? And the Martian grubworm TV dinner. So they're eating grubworms. A lot of major publications these days are trying to prepare us to eat insects. I don't know if you've noticed. There were like New York Times articles about like, would you eat grasshoppers? Blah, blah, blah. Maybe you should think twice. There was also a Wired article, I think, that was about how there's a time and a place for cannibalism. And I'm like, whoa, what's going to happen here? What do you guys keep telling us this stuff for? uh, Next
Soil.
customer. Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Soylent Green.
Soylent Green, exactly. So next customer. They start going through, apparently the machine doesn't pay much attention because they start going through other cartons of cigarettes. I guess they're back in the aisles. It's not exactly clear. They're going through the cartons. They check the Dominoes. Actually, no, he says check the Dominoes. Then Al says, don't pick an off-brand. Pick something like Winston's or Cool's. He pulls out a carton. It's empty, but he shakes it, and there's something inside. So it's an empty cigarette carton with something inside, very light. Something bounced about, weightless and small. He tears open the carton, and he finds a note in handwriting familiar to him and to Joe. So a note from Runsiter. Essential, I get in touch with you. Situation serious, and certainly will get more serious. We'll get more so as time goes on. There are several possible explanations, which I'll discuss with you. Anyhow, don't give up. I'm sorry about Wendy Wright. In that connection, we did all we could. So they get a note from Runsiter in Baltimore in a random store. So random city, random store, random carton of cigarettes. And their minds are blown, of course. I wonder how he knew we'd come here. So they're still trying to think of this in some sort of rational terms. This has all been planned. It's an elaborate hoax. He knew we'd come here somehow. And he put the note in the carton of cigarettes that he somehow knew we would choose. It made no sense. And yet here too, the opposing forces were at work. Decay versus Runsiter, Al said to himself. Throughout the world, perhaps throughout the universe, maybe the sun will go out, and Glenn Runsiter will place a substitute sun in its place if he can. So that's the binary that they draw, Decay versus Runsiter. But we find soon enough that even Runsiter is going to have some conflicting messages in himself. Or is it? Okay, I'll not skip ahead. So he says, let's try something else. He picks up an expensive German-made tape recorder. Doesn't open it. They say, let's just go right back to the office with this tape recorder. Back in New York, they immediately turn over the tape recorder to the firm's shop. So they have sort of, a technical shop, a technician's shop, I guess I should say, like a handyman, I imagine. 15 minutes later, the foreman comes out to make a report on the tape recorder. He says, all the moving parts in the tape transport stage are worn. The rubber drive tire has flat spots on it. The pieces of rubber are all over the insides. The brake for high-speed wind and rewind are virtually gone. It needs cleaning and lubricating throughout. It's seen plenty of use. In fact, I'd say it needs a complete overhaul, including new belts. So the tape recorder in the trip that they made, actually, he never opens it. He should have checked for a first reference, huh? But yeah, the tape recorder is completely worn out. Not only that, it's obsolete. I don't know if I put that part up here. This is not my day, the shop foreman said. This morning when I got up, my parrot was dead. Dead of what? Joe asked. I don't know, just dead, stiff as a board. I had to use the picture from the famous Monty Python skit, Dead Parrot. Real heads will get it. So this is interesting because I immediately was like, did Philip K. Dick see the Dead Parrot sketch? I'm sure he did at some point, but I mean before he published this. And do you know when Dead Parrot came out? The same year as Ubik. Yes, 1969 was the original Dead Parrot skit by Monty Python on Monty Python's Flying Circus.
I don't know the skit. Could you just quick summarize
It's
it?
very silly. I mean, it's Monty Python, and especially their really early stuff was really nonsense. So the idea is this guy comes into the pet store to return the parrot that
Because it's dead.
is dead, but it turns out that the parrot was dead the whole time. In fact, it had only been nailed to the post where it was standing. But the sketch is in the form of an argument in which the pet shop owner tries to convince him that the parrot is not, in fact, dead, but he's only sleeping. Look at him. He's pining for the fjords. Like he has all of these excuses and things to say that the parrot is not dead, and it's just a back and forth argument that he's bleeding deceased. Look at him. He's an ex-parrot. He's a former parrot. It's funny.
Is it possible they got their idea from the
Yeah,
book
yeah.
or
It's
the other
possible that one is actually more likely because if Ubik was published in 69, that means it was already written sometime before and edited. So it's much more likely that they got it from this. But on the other hand, it's such a throwaway line in the book that I don't know if I would be reading Ubik and read that and be like, oh my God, I just had a great idea. But you never
Well,
know.
thought, okay, here's what I thought. After I went back and read what Mrs. Wirt was wearing with the triangle glasses and everything, and I convinced myself the lady at the store is not Mrs. Wirt. She's just another person that cannot figure out what's going on in life. Then we meet this shop foreman, and I thought he was the same thing. Like we know Half-Life is a thing in 1992. And we know that Ella was never really able to describe to Runsiter what it is, so he can't really visualize it. And it just seems like they can remember their former life and they have a now life, but nobody seems to have a memory of that moment of transition. And so here goes the foreman saying, you know, this is not my day. I thought he was just another person who's real in this.
Yeah.
This reality. That's what I thought. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
Then it's not his throwaway line because he's yet another person who's trying to figure out why are things disintegrating, but our heroes don't hook up with anyone outside of their little bubble.
Yeah. I don't know. Vasilia, did you have something?
This with dead parrot is like those old lady that returned dead plants.
Yes, that's right. They are also oh, she's trying to get a refund. And in the skit, that's what's happening. So yeah, there is more of a connection where maybe the guys at Monty Python read Ubik and were inspired by that scene as well. Yeah. I mean, you can look it up on YouTube. It's one of their better known skits.
But
mhm.
both items are dead. I'm not so sure if that's Vesuvi's point, but the parrot and the plant are dead.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, they're both dead. The machine, though, doesn't try to convince her it's alive. It's only resting. Then he says something else about the tape recorder. So this is the other thing. It's not just worn out, it's obsolete. This has really, it's something that we talked about last time, but I've really just been trying to think it through. And the idea of obsolescence is, so here's the best I've come up with so far. Hopefully I can frame it better by the end of these sessions, but there's a kind of aging that is about physical objects. It's about how the passage of time and exposure to, elements and forces affects physical things. And then there's a kind of informational aging. So the thing about obsolescence is that it's socially decided. Does that make sense? It's decided externally. There's not an individual who says, oh, it's obsolete now. It's kind of a socially determined, it's kind of publicly determined, right? And it's determined by, other technologies, for example, but it's not obsolescence is not a characteristic of a thing. Like you couldn't, take the device into a laboratory and pull it apart and find the obsolescence inside there. It's a concept that's applied to the objects. So it really gets confounded, and I don't think that this book is supposed to let you figure it out, because later on we're going to see that when he gets the old car, it's in brand new condition. When he gets the paper from 1939, it's good. It's like a day old. So it's obsolete, but it's not aged. So these things are working on a different, they're not on the same axis, apparently. You can get something obsolete and new. you can get something, I don't know, I guess old and current like the cigarettes. They're not obsolete, but then do cigarettes become obsolete? No, that's not a characteristic we apply unless you count like vaping or something. I guess there are probably some people who say cigarettes are obsolete. Uh, okay, so yeah, we don't even use these drives anymore. You'll never get parts for this unless somebody hand makes them, and it wouldn't be worth it. The thing's antiquated. Just throw it away, forget about it. They start worrying about how they're going to find food if everything keeps going bad and getting old. What are we going to do? All the food in the supermarkets are not going to be good after so many years, except for the canned goods. And Joe says, I saw a lot of canned goods in Baltimore. Al says, well, that's because 40 years ago, supermarkets sold a greater proportion of their commodities in cans rather than frozen. That may turn out to be our sole food source. But the time difference seems to be speeding up. So they're worried that, it's jumped from 2 years to 40 years. Maybe it'll be 100 years tomorrow, and then it won't matter. Even if it's canned, most food will not be edible after that much time, canned or not. Yes, Ajit included this cogitate because it's over here. Da, 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 da. Isn't it? It is, yeah, right here. That may turn out to be our sole source. You're right, he cogitated. So cogitate, it's, yeah, to ponder, to think about. It's the word you've heard in the Cartesian cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Okay. Al says, be quiet a second, I have to think something out. Maybe Baltimore is only there when one of us goes there. This is solipsism, right? That's the idea. Do you exist when I don't see you? Maybe only I exist. Maybe Baltimore is only there when one of us goes there. It's the tree falling in the forest and all that. Also in 3D graphic rendering on computers, like in a video game, that the machine is only rendering what's on the screen. So like the other world around doesn't exist, only where the quote unquote camera is pointed.
Einstein asked the physician that make this theory, quantum theory, if moon exists when we don't look at it. Does moon exist when nobody look at it?
Right. Well, at least we can't necessarily prove it, I guess. I don't know. It depends on what you accept as proof.
Yeah, it seems like the gravitational pull, if it was gone, would like create some change. But this original guy, Rene
Descartes,
who thought of this whole, what if nothing in the world is true except me? He always seemed to me like such a narcissistic, weird guy. Like, was he on drugs when he thought that?
No,
like,
actually, that characterization is, I wouldn't put that on him because there's much more leading up to that where he's basically trying to find a ground floor for knowledge at all, right? And so in order to do so, he says, okay, so you could maybe think that you're experiencing something correctly, but it can turn out that you're dreaming or something, right? Or it can turn out that you're hallucinating. He said it could even be the case that there's what did he say? A demon, like a
demon, yeah, creating everything, which I think Dick was really working with.
Yeah.
Dick was on drugs a lot, and he had trouble knowing reality from dreams. But then as soon as he gives one character that very solid, like we need to think through this, then Ding Dong Joe just takes it away and says it's of no importance whatsoever.
Yeah. That's his reaction.
Yeah,
like what difference does it make? I'm sure you guys have, or most of you at least, have seen The Matrix. Do you remember the character Cypher? He's like a guy who he makes a deal with the villains of the story. The Matrix is like a false reality. He makes a deal to be in the Matrix, but he gets to be like rich and do whatever he wants. And he's like, I know it's fake, but I don't care. That's this. That's hey, you're in the Matrix and none of this is real. He's like, that's a philosophical problem of no importance or meaning. He says this while he's eating a steak, in the film. He just takes a big
Right.
bite.
It seems like Al is so close to figuring out like what's going on and he's seriously thinking about it. And cogitate is like a portmanteau of your cogitation and your agitation. He's just turning it over in his head. But nope,
Yeah.
Joe's just like Mr.,
Yeah.
dismissive.
He's really
We're
a
not
chip
going to
off.
worry about that.
He's really a chip off the old block when we think back to Runseter and his similar, like, I'm not here for a theological discussion. Let me talk to my dead wife and get back to work. Yeah. So he says, I've been looking at the instruction manual that came with the tape recorder and check it out. It's made by Runseter of Zurich. So once again, we have Runseter appearing in a product, and there's a maintenance station in, yes, Des Moines, Iowa, in the North American Confederation. So they say, all right, we should maybe consider getting over there to Des Moines so that we can figure out what's going on here. And meanwhile, he thought, as our world declines, turns back onto itself, bringing to the surface past phases of reality. By the end of the week, we may wake up and find ancient clanging streetcars moving down Fifth Avenue. So yeah, he thinks trolley dodgers. And then he wonders what that means. So a thought pops into his head, and then he asks what the thought means. An abandoned verbal term rising from the past, a hazy, distant emanation in his mind. So this is going to be more and more prevalent, that even memories and familiarities are emerging in his and other people's experience, where they're able to feel sort of natural about these things. The trolley dodgers, 100 years ago at least. Yeah, he's saying it's at least 100 years old. Obsessively, the term remained lodged within awareness. He couldn't forget it. How come you know that? The shop foreman asks. Nobody knows that anymore. That's the old name for the Brooklyn Dodgers. He eyed Al suspiciously. So he's having these memories that have some substance to them. Are there? I've been to New York. There aren't trolleys. Are there trolleys? I don't remember trolleys. I know there are subways and stuff.
Well, it's like Chicago. There was trolleys a long, long time ago, but then they
Yeah.
got rid of them, and the Dodgers who moved to LA. But I feel like this is more proof that the guy who came to fix the tape recorder, he's real too, because he probably died at an older age than them, because he seems to actually remember the trolley Dodgers.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually didn't interpret it that way, but I guess you're right about that. Because the way I interpret it was, how come you know that? As in, I didn't know that, or how could you know that? But yeah, how come you know that could be, I know that and nobody else does. Oh,
Well, yeah, the repairman fleshes out the definition.
I thought that was Joe speaking. That's why I was confused. Nobody knows that anymore. I thought that was
I thought
Joe.
maybe he was a sports buff that knew the origin of
Right.
of a team, but he looks like, why the heck would you bring that up?
Yeah.
That's very obscure.
Right. Why are you bringing it up right now in front of me?
Well,
So
maybe you are right. Maybe that was Joe who said it, because it depends on how it's blocked. If the foreman was the one who asked the question, and then the next quotation is on another line, then that indicates a new speaker. And the
that's what I
speaker,
thought.
yeah, the
Yeah.
speaker cannot be Al, because he's eyeing Al, and that's all the information we have. And I don't know why I thought that was the other person. Oh, I have to go back and look again, but go ahead. I won't hold you up.
So, okay, they're headed out now, and this is Joe and Al. And as they head for the elevator, things start getting pretty wobbly for poor Al. When the elevator arrives, So it says the racket awoke Al from his introspection. Reflexively, he pushed aside the iron grill safety door and found himself facing an open cage with polished brass fittings suspended from a cable. A dull-eyed, uniformed operator sat on a stool working the handle. He gazed at them with indifference. It was not indifference, however, that Al felt. Don't get in. So he holds Joe back and says, don't get in there.
So in my book, it is blocked as if that's all part of the shop foreman's quotation.
So yeah, maybe my formatting is also bad. I should go out and try to find a hard copy of this book instead of going through this.
Paragraph doesn't begin until it indents, Joe said we better go upstairs, but everything else was in the same paragraph as the shop foreman. That is so interesting that it's messing with your ability to
Yeah.
this book.
It's getting very hazy for me.
Speaker. Yeah, that's crazy. Okay.
Also, sometimes when I'm grabbing these from the PDF, that could be my mistake too, because I'm not always grabbing the whole thing. I'm sometimes just trying to expedite the process and getting, little excerpts here and there. So that could also be on me. So he says, think back to the elevator we rode in earlier today. So the sort of, futuristic 1992 elevator. He stopped talking because the elderly clanking contraption had dimmed, and in its place, the familiar elevator resumed its existence. So the proper, quote unquote, proper elevator comes back. It lurks at the periphery of his vision as if ready to ebb forward. So he feels like the old elevator is just ambiently kind of in the background, trying to get through, trying to get back to the front, to ebb forward as soon as he and Joe turn their attention away. It wants to come back, he realized. This is interesting. Those past emanations have a will, they want to come back and take over. It turns out, though, that Joe didn't even see the old elevator. It was just Al. You didn't see the old elevator? No. Did you see anything? The normal elevator I see every day when I come to work. I saw what I always see, what I see now. So Al notices, well, that means our perceptions are beginning to differ. I wonder what that means. It also says, I didn't grab it, that he suspects that this is what Wendy went through, something like this before she died. This is interesting. He became aware of an insidious seeping cooling off, which at some earlier and unremembered time had begun to explore him, investigating him as well as the world around him. It reminded him of their final minutes on Luna, showed itself as bulb-like swellings that sighed audibly and popped into the manifold open wounds. The cold drifted all the way down into the heart of things, the core which made them live. This got me thinking about how the cold is consistently characterized as the active. Like the cold is so in thermodynamics. Oh, by the way, I am not a physicist, so I'm just gonna kind of give a really amateurish version of this. But if I'm to understand correctly, in thermodynamics, the dissipated state would be the cooled state. Like the cold is not a thing, it's an absence of heat, right? It's kind of like the dark is the absence of light. But here, the cold is active, it moves, it seeks, it has a will. So it's not the dissipated state. I just was thinking about that. I don't know. Nothing else so far. I mean, there will be more of that because it comes up again, and I'm going to continue thinking about it. So yeah, the cold is seeking. And yes, manifold from Ajit. Having variety, variation, having various features, characteristics, being so in many ways, consisting of many of a kind combined. Yes, Vasile.
Well, this it's called. It's maybe like in real life, cold is absence of heat, while in half life it is cold. That is
right. Yeah, in the cold pack, maybe heat is just the absence of cold. Everything's hot. And yeah, that's good. There is further later on mention of this like world symmetry. We'll get to that in a second, though. That's not far from now. But he thought this is projection on my part. Isn't the universe, which is being entombed by layers of wind, cold, darkness, and ice, all this is going on within me? So again, we're doing this solipsism. And yet I seem to see it outside. Strange, he thought. Is the whole world inside me, engulfed by my body? So Al is also going through this sort of, I mean, a thoroughgoing thinker has to at least consider the possibility of solipsism, that, that maybe I am a brain in a jar. Um, the uncertainty which I feel, the slowing down into entropy, that's the process. And the ice which I see is a result of the success of the process. When I blink out, he thought, the whole universe will disappear. Yes, for you. This seems to be some pretty solid evidence that they are, in fact, in cold pack. He says this can't be normal death. This is unnatural. The regular momentum of dissolution has been replaced by another factor imposed on it. Yes, it's called half-life. A pressure arbitrary and forced by technology. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. I could be wrong. Al, not feeling well, says maybe I'll go splash some water on my face and that might help. So he finds the men's room, and with Joe's help, he opens it. He needs Joe's help because he's feeling very weak. Joe remains in the corridor. Something's the matter with him, he says. Seeing the old elevator made a change in him. He wondered why. Al reappears. Joe says, what is it? And Al says, you got to come in here and look at this. In the bathroom, it says on the wall, again, very on the nose, because earlier we had caveat emptor as a tattoo on a person whose services were being purchased. Now we have literally the writing on the wall. Jump in the urinal and stand on your head. I'm the one that's alive. You're all dead. Okay, so that seems to be pretty strong confirmation, but maybe not. Yes, Vasily.
It's also he wants hot water, not cold
Right.
water.
Yes, he wants hot water. It does keep coming up that they feel cold, so for sure. I want to see with my own eyes, he says, pushing against the door, that you're all right. So this is a couple paragraphs later. It seems that Al is giving up, and Joe wants to see him, but Al he's kind of sitting in the bathroom, and he turns the light off, and he says, "You can't do anything to help me. I'll tell them not to come in here." That's supposed to have an opening quote. "I'll tell them not to come in here and look because it might bother you. They might bother you." At this point, Al stops responding. "Well, so long," says Joe. You want to like him, but then he says stuff like that, and you're like, oh God. Yes, Vasily.
Well, also Wendy, she died in bathroom, so probably she also saw that
She was in
message.
the closet, though, wasn't she?
Yes. Oh, yes, she was in closet, but similar.
Yeah. Yeah, they should have checked the wall of the closet. Maybe there was a message for them.
Oh, I hadn't
Yep.
thought about it, but I wanted to agree with Vasily that it appears as though in the final state they prefer to be alone.
Yes. Yeah. Wendy didn't try to, well, I mean, apparently didn't try to wake Joe. She wanted to just go and quietly pass on in the other room by herself. Yeah.
I think it's true in our life too, though. If you've ever been with a loved one who's close to death, that story after story, it's always like, I got up just to go to the bathroom once and I was there all day long. And it seems like people just don't like to pass away in front of someone else. If they have,
Right.
they do it the minute you
Yeah.
look away, even if you were there all day long.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems to line up with my understanding as well. I guess it's different for some people, but yeah. So yeah, Joe says, well, I'll try to keep people out of here. Then as he goes back, there's a commercial, and in the commercial there's a bathroom. The screen then displayed her bathroom. She is the person in the commercial, and picked up graffiti on her bathroom wall too. The same familiar scrawl reading, "Lean over the bowl and then take a dive. All of you are dead. I am alive." Only one person in the conference room watched, however. Joe stood alone in an otherwise empty room. The others had gone. He wondered where they were, and if he would live long enough to find them. It did not seem likely. So Joe is also thinking he's probably not going to get through this. The forces opposed to him are too great and mysterious. Um, Chapter 10, has perspiration odor taken you out of the swim? 10-day Ubik deodorant spray or Ubik roll-on ends worry of offending. Brings you back to where the happening is. It just seems off to me. I don't know. Safe when used as directed in a conscientious program of body hygiene. Okay, so that is to say, a program that is motivated by real conscientious commitment. Interesting addendum. It's, I practice hygiene out of a sense of conscience and responsibility to others. I don't know. Yes, Ajit.
The rest of the team disappears. He's in the conference room alone.
Yeah.
Why did they leave Joe and Al? Joe and Al, wait, they've come back from their trip to tape recorder. They've interacted with the foreman. So the team is.
The team disappeared at some point when they were in Baltimore. Like they've been gone a while. Well, I don't know how fast they
Yeah,
get out,
they
but
come back to the office and then they try to leave. At least maybe I misread something, but my impression was they try to leave and then that doesn't work out. They try to leave through the elevator. Or is that them arriving? I don't know. I can't remember now. My impression was they were going to try to go to Des Moines and then like this happened. And then so he goes back to the office to figure out his next step. So yeah, the television announcer says, and now back to Jim Hunter and the news. So now the news is on. And we get the sunny, hairless face of the newscaster. He says, Glenn Runseter came back today to the place of his birth, but it was not the kind of return which gladdened anyone's heart. Yesterday, tragedy struck at Runseter Associates, probably the best known of Earth's many prudence organizations. So yes, we do get this news confirmation of the fate of Runseter. I wonder who authorized the transfer to Des Moines, Joe Chip said to himself, of the body. As if in response, the television says, so the newscaster says, answering his question directly, it was the sad but inexorably dictated decision by the wife of Glenn Runseter. So he asks the question and it's immediately answered by the newscaster. The newscaster's voice continued, which brought about this final chapter, which we are now viewing. Mrs. Runseter, herself in Coldpack, whom it had been hoped her husband would join, revived to face this calamity. Mrs. Runseter learned this morning of the fate which had overtaken her husband, gave the decision to abandon efforts to awaken belated half-life in the man she had expected to merge with, and a hope disappointed by reality. Okay, so many of us are here. Mr. Len Nigelman, Prudent Society chairman, approached us in New York and informed us that he had heard of Runseter's death. He informed us that the body of the deceased was being brought here to Des Moines and said we ought to come here. So I put all this up here because there seems to be this, the message is emanating through the words of others. It's like the body of the deceased was being brought here. He said we ought to come here. We agreed. So he brought us in his ship. This is the ship. So these are the other inertials here. That's like Denny and the gang are all there in Des Moines. At least on the television they are. We appreciated him notifying us of the change of location from the moratorium in Zurich to the mortuary here. So they're just like hammering the message home. We're in Des Moines. It seems to be directly addressing Joe. Several of us are not here, so this is even more of that. However, because they weren't at the firm's offices, I refer in particular to Al Hammond, Wendy Wright, and the firm's field tester, Mr. Chip. The whereabouts of the three of them is unknown to us, but perhaps along with, yes, the news announcer says, perhaps they will see this telecast, which is being beamed by satellite all over the Earth. Over all the Earth. And will come here to Des Moines for this tragic occasion, as I'm sure, and as you undoubtedly are sure, Mr. Rensselaer and also Mrs. Rensselaer would want them to. And now back to Jim Hunter. Okay, so the news clip seems to directly address Joe's confusion about what he should do next. He turns off the TV screen, but at some point the TV screen pops back on. It relights. So much to his surprise, he had not repressed the pedal switch. That's repressed, but of course I first read it like repress, like a repressed memory. He had not there should be a dash there, I think. He had not repressed the pedal switch. In addition, it had changed channels. Images flitted past of one thing and then another until at last the mysterious agency was satisfied. That is to say, the mysterious force of will was satisfied. The final image remained the face of Glenn Runsiter. So Glenn appears on the TV. He starts advertising immediately. Tired of lazy taste buds? Has boiled cabbage taken over your world of food? That same old stale, flat Monday morning odor? See what I mean? The wording is always just off a little. Monday morning odor, no matter how many dimes you put in your stove. That's funny too. Like, I put 10 dimes in there. This should be delicious. Ubik wakes up food flavor, puts hearty taste back where it belongs, and restores fine food smell. You see, world deterioration of this regressive type is this is, by the way, I've skipped ahead a little bit because I wanted to make this point. Here we get conflicting information from Runsiter, almost within a few paragraphs. So this is the first part. We haven't gotten to the conflict yet. So Joe is like, are we in Half-Life? He basically confirms that, but he says, you see, world deterioration of this regressive type is a normal experience of many Half-Lifers, especially in the early stages. When ties to the real reality are still very strong, a sort of lingering universe is retained as a residual charge, experienced as a pseudo-environment, but highly unstable and unsupported by any ergic substructure. That'll be on the next slide. This is particularly true when several memory systems are fused, as in the case of you people. But with today's new, more powerful than ever Ubik, all this has changed. So it's like he's speaking directly to the matter and then slips back into advertising, but for Ubik. By the way, this fits in with that kind of Tibetan Book of the Dead thing, because there's a part of the experience of the individual who's passed on where they are trying to be alive again. Have you guys seen Into the Void, the movie by Gaspar Noé? It's he's kind of I would say a lot of his movies are pretty brutal and difficult to watch because of that. They're kind of categorized as horror, more or less, but Into the Void is an actual attempt at making a movie wherein a person has died and is going through this thing. He used the Tibetan Book of the Dead as kind of his guidebook for directing the film and writing it. Anyway, there's a part of the movie where he's trying to be alive again, and it just doesn't work. He can't quite talk to people. It has a really hazy feel, like all this. So yes, erg. So this ergic is a Philip K. Dick term. He does come up with a lot of his own words, but apparently it's a unit of work representing work done by a force of one dyne. So a simple way to say this is that the erg is a kind of force or power, or we can just say energy. We can compare it to joules. So ergic substructure would be something like an energetic substructure, a substructure that has some substance and force to it, I think is a good way to interpret that. Saying that it's a reality with nothing underneath, something like that. So Joe fixes his eyes on the screen. We get the more advertisement, the cartoon fairy, flying around in spirals, squirting Ubik here and there. A hard-eyed housewife with big teeth and horse's chin replaced the cartoon fairy. I came over to Ubik after trying weak, out-of-date reality supports. My pots and pans were turning into heaps of rust. The floors of my connaught were sagging. My husband, Charlie, put his foot right through the bedroom door. But now I use economical, new, powerful today's Ubik. There again, see the word order is weird. Economical, new, powerful today's. That is not standard English, right? It would be today's economical, new, power. Oh, geez, actually, that's a tough one. I teach this, by the way. There are actually complicated rules to adjective orders, but this is not right. I'd have to think about it for a little bit. You wouldn't put all of these adjectives and then today's at the end, and then Ubik. Probably today's powerful new economical Ubik, something like that. The one that's last should be most closely associated with the object. Yes, Vasilia.
Also, and with. That's necessary. It should be today's Ubik miraculous results.
Yes. Yeah, with miraculous results. Yeah. But that's just another example of this thing I was talking about. The very just odd, slightly off turns of phrase, I guess. Ubik is sold by leading home art stores throughout Earth. Do not take internally. Even the order of the information is strange. Keep away from open flame. Do not deviate from printed procedural approaches as expressed on the label. So look for it, Joe. Don't just sit there. Go out and buy a can of Ubik spray, Ubik, and spray it all around you night and day. Okay. Now, Joe stands up and says, "You know I'm here. Does that mean you can hear and see me?" Of course. I can't hear and see you. Of course not. This commercial message is on videotape. I recorded it 2 weeks ago, specifically 12 days before my death. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. Just a few paragraphs ago, he said, you're dead. Now he says, I'm dead. I knew the bomb blast was coming. I used precogs to make all of these tapes and make all these messages and so on, presumably, right? Then you really are dead. Of course I'm dead. By the way, his precogs are really talented because they were able to make this tape in such a way that he says, then you are really dead. And he says, of course I'm dead. As a response, an immediate response, in a conversational flow of words, right? So that means the precogs were good enough for them to make this really granular determination about how the conversation was going to flow. Yes, Vasilya?
They knew how the conversation will be, but they didn't help still Ranster to survive because he was surprised when the blow.
Right, yeah. Right. I guess that was just the unavoidable part. Yeah, the precogs, like, yeah, we knew I was going to die and I went anyway. So, I mean, this clearly seems to be the false half of this contradiction, right? So, yeah, okay. So, you really are dead. Yes, of course I'm dead. Didn't you watch the telecast from Des Moines, just now? I know you did because my precog saw it too. So that's how I'm making this tape and so on. Anyhow, try to hang on. Maybe once you get to Des Moines and see my body lying in state, you'll calm down. What's this Ubik? And now this is where the precogs failed, apparently, if we're buying that story, because as soon as he asks about Ubik, he acts as though he's a recording from this point forward. I think it's too late to help Al. Joe says, what's this Ubik made of? How does it work? As a matter of fact, Al probably induced the writing on the bedroom wall. So as soon as Ubik comes up as a topic, he goes into, I actually am a recording that was put together with the help of some precogs. So yeah, you wouldn't have seen that writing on the wall if it weren't for Al. You really are on videotape, aren't you? Joe says, suddenly just buying that, even though they were practically having a conversation just a few minutes before. You can't hear me, it's true. Runster says, and in addition, Al, blah, blah, blah. If the home art store that you patronize doesn't yet carry Ubik, return to your Conep, Mr. Chip, and you'll find a free sample has arrived by mail. A free introductory sample, Mr. Chip, that will keep you going until you can buy a regular-sized can. The advertising lady then fades out. The TV set becomes opaque and silent. The process that had turned it on had turned it back off. So he realizes, okay, I need to go to my apartment and find this Ubik. And then I need to get to Des Moines, presumably is the next step after that. He's speculating about what Runstetter has told him. And he's trying to figure out how it's possible that that whole conversation happened. He says, maybe, I added the maybe to summarize the previous part. Maybe the tape had been made honestly, but mistakenly. So Runstetter had not died, but he thought he was going to die. They had died, but that was the part that is not up here is that maybe they got some bad precog information. So apparently that's a thing that can happen because he mentions it. So maybe the precogs didn't do their job properly, and the tape was made with the presumption that Runstetter was going to die, but he hadn't died. But they had died instead, which is what the graffiti told them. Before the bomb blast, maybe he gave instructions for the taped commercial to be played at this time, and the network did so, Runstetter having failed to countermand his original order because, of course, he would be dead in that situation. That would explain the disparity between what Runstetter had said on the tape and what he had written on the bathroom walls. It would explain both, which, as far as he could make out, no other explanation would. Omitting the fact that, I mean, if you know of Half-Life and you have some vague idea that it's a reality in which things might not cohere very nicely all the time, that seems like there are other explanations you could consider. Maybe I'm in Half-Life and everyone's hallucinating. I'm hallucinating. I'm experiencing other people in Half-Life, something like that.
That's what I think. It seems clear they're dead because they had lives, and in their normal lives for 20, 30 years, however old he is, they didn't have coins that changed. They didn't have...
Yeah.
Oh, you just wake up one day and your life is completely different. So, either you have a brain tumor and you're experiencing hallucinations, or you've suddenly, I've noticed that schizophrenia, when people have it, will oftentimes manifest at puberty, but it seems like some people are actually aware that something happened that changed stuff, but not our Joe, like,
yeah. I
think steadfastly holding on to there must be some other explanation.
I think it's denial is a powerful thing. He wants to be alive and for everything to have a rational explanation. And he's like, I'm desperate to come up with one. That's my project. So that's what I'm going to work on as long as I can until I can't deny it anymore. That's it. So he starts to wonder whether Runstetter is toying with them, leading them first in one direction, then another. In addition, if Runstetter were alive, then not one but two Runstetters existed. The genuine one in the real world, trying to reach them, and the phantasmagoric Runstetter who had become a corpse in this Half-Life world, the body in Des Moines. And to carry this logic out to its full extent, other persons here, such as Ray Hollis, Len Nigelman, were also phantasmagoria, while their authentic counterparts remained in the world of the living. So he sees this
That's
as a,
what I think is happening. And I
yeah,
think there some people like them, like there's them, their group that all died at once. And I think there's also other people like the lady who was complaining at the store and like the guy with the dead parrot who have also entered this half-life. Like maybe they're in Cold Pack close by in the same moratorium, but
right.
that's what I think is happening.
Now that sounds good. I mean, yeah, those people are just kind of living their regular lives and doing sort of normal things. Yeah, yeah,
And feeling the same way, like why is everything disintegrating?
yeah. He goes on to think, very confusing. I don't like it at all. It has a nice symmetrical quality, he says, but it strikes me as untidy. It's a strange choice of words, untidy. It's so messy, but symmetrical. So as he gets home to his apartment, we begin with these descriptions of items that have aged throughout the place. The living room smells of burned grease. He hasn't smelled that since childhood. It turns out his stove had reverted back to an ancient Buck natural gas model with clogged burners and encrusted oven door, which didn't close entirely. Uh, there's also a coffee maker, a toaster. This is that gas stove he was talking about. Um, these are the kinds of things that he would be seeing. Just to summarize, I used some pictures instead. One good thing is that the coffee maker no longer needs coins, so he can actually make coffee for once. He's free, but not entirely because, of course, the door still works. We'll get to that in a second. Why hadn't the TV set reverted into formless metals and plastics? Those, after all, were its constituents. It had been constructed out of them, not out of an earlier radio. Perhaps this weirdly verified a discarded ancient philosophy, that of Plato's ideal objects, the universals which in each class were real. Now, in case you haven't heard of this idea, Platonic objects. So this really simple example is like a circle. Like if you destroyed every circle in the world, uh, do circles exist anymore? Is there such thing as a circle? So Plato's ideal circle would say, yes, there's an ideal circle. It's not an individual instance of a circle that makes circles real, but the existence of this ideal object. Um, it's it could be extended to something like, let's say, horses. So is there an ideal object horse? Like if all horses were destroyed or vanished from the earth, would there be such a thing as the horse? And it gets a little bit trickier there, where on the one hand, you could perhaps imagine something like an ideal geometrical object, but if you really look closely at evolutionary biology, you couldn't really say that there actually is something like that. The horses, even between species, would have slight variations. So what do you really mean? And then you could have some sort of, definition of a horse that says, well, even if there are variations between species of horses, we can still kind of say there's this horse idea. We have kind of a uh, Polish dictionary horse. Do you guys know that reference, by the way? But that's not a jab at Polish people. That there's a real one of the first Polish dictionaries has an entry for horse, and it says everyone knows what a horse is.
I like
But
that.
that's not a jab at Polish people. I just realized that might have sounded bad. But no, I love that because it's like the lexicographer was just he had a long day. It's just, you know what? Everyone knows what a horse is. Okay, stop asking me. Um, it's yeah, it's like 18th century. It's the first Polish dictionary. It has a couple of other funny things in it.
The concept of the horse would be so well known, you might consider it ubiquitous.
Yeah, sure, sure. But it just reminds me of like a parent who's like just done to death, had a long day, and the kid is like, "So what's a horse?" And they're like, "I can't talk about it right now." Everybody knows what a horse is. Jeez. Ask anyone else is kind of what he's saying, not me. Um, in all fairness, the dictionary does go on to give a better definition in the same entry, so it's not the only thing it says. It also has another entry for like, I can't remember if it's a goat. I think it's a goat, and it says a kind of stinking animal. Of all the animals to choose, why wouldn't you choose like a skunk or something? But anyway, we have kind of the Polish dictionary horse here. It's like this idea of a universal idea of a horse. So that's a short version of a Platonic ideal. So he's asking, is there a Platonic ideal of the television, right? There's like a television form. The form TV set had been a template imposed as a successor to other templates. So he imagines it like an evolutionary process. So here we can think about the evolution of the horse if we want to. Like the procession of frames in a movie sequence. Prior forms, see, this is what like Joe is not a total idiot. Like sometimes he gets into these little musings. So he thinks prior forms must carry on an invisible residual life in every object. The past is latent, just under the surface, capable of rising once again, once the later imprinting, unfortunately and against ordinary experience, vanished. The man contains not the boy, but earlier men. It's interesting to think about there because this goes back to that idea of something like obsolescence versus like a physical ravaging of age, right? The older version of the man is not the boy. There's the older version of men. You could maybe even say maybe there's the older version of boys, or they're like a culturally imbibed version of the man. Something like that. I don't know. I haven't thought it through entirely, but so yeah, history began a long time ago, he says. The dehydrated remains of Wendy. The procession of forms that normally takes place, that procession ceased, and the last form wore off with nothing subsequent, nothing to come after. No newer form, no stage of what we see as growth take its place. So this is like the beginning of entropy, I guess. This must be what we experience as old age. From this absence comes degeneration and senility. Only in this instance, it happened abruptly, that is to say, all at once, in a matter of hours. But this old theory, didn't Plato think that something survived the decline, something inner, not able to decay? The ancient dualism, body separated from soul. The body ending as Wendy did, and the soul, out of its nest, the bird flown elsewhere. Maybe so, he thought, to be reborn again, as the Tibetan Book of the Dead says. It really is true, Christ, I hope so, because in that case, we all can meet again. He goes on to say, like Christopher Robin and Winnie the Pooh, the famous characters from A. Milne, Milline. I never knew how to pronounce her name or his name. I'm not sure. By the way, Winnie the Pooh is now in the public
Domain.
Yeah, what's the copyright has expired on Winnie the Pooh. Anyone can make a Winnie the Pooh story now.
Huh.
In fact, it just happened this year. Someone has already started making a gritty, like Winnie the Pooh horror film. Someone was waiting in the wings to do this. Any day now, since the day is coming.
When I was in fourth grade, I had a teacher, I'm pretty old now, and that teacher was elderly then, but she said as a young woman, she met the actual Christopher Robin when she was
Really?
in England, and that as much as everyone adored his father's books and everything, it really wasn't so fun to be that guy's child, that it was your classic, dad wasn't around a whole lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why Christopher Robin didn't renew or have his kids renew. Maybe they've all passed away.
Huh. Yeah, being a children's author back then was like being in Led Zeppelin. That's why he was never home. He was out partying all the time. Okay. He sees a newspaper at the far end of the sofa. He reads the dates. Tuesday, September 12th. He reads the headline, French claim Siegfried Line dented report, Siegfried Line dented? Report gains in area near Saarbrücken. Okay, so World War II headlines. Polish report claims German forces halted. Say invaders throw new forces into battle without new gains. Okay, I found not September 13th, but September 1st. Yes, the paper was 3 cents. You can see it up in the upper right corner. That interested him too. What could you get now for 3 cents? This seems a little off to me because actually, like, things cost like nickels and dimes, and he's like, what could you get with 3 cents? Like, apparently something. It's only 2 more cents to get, you know, out of your apartment. He wanders around looking for other changes. He finds a chest of drawers. And on that chest of drawers, he finds all these pictures of Runstetter. Runstetter throughout time, baby, small boy, young man, still recognizable. He opens up his wallet and he finds his pictures are all snapshots of Runstetter, excuse me. None of his family, none of his friends, just Runstetter. So it's like that scene in Being John Malkovich.
So I was annoyed with him before, but this is when my blood pressure really started to rise because it's like, dude, you've been given one and only one job. You've seen 2 people pass away already in a horrible way. They wither up, they turn into dry twigs, and it's just like they were mailing it to your house. All you had to do was go get this Ubik. But he's like, la la la, oh, look at all the changes in my house.
Yeah.
What is wrong with you, Joe?
I just can't help but think back to the description at the beginning of what it's like to be in Cold Pack or to be in Half-Life and how you're kind of, things don't quite work. Things are fuzzy. So I maybe that's it. Like that he's just not thinking in a normal way.
Well, earlier, Rand and I had a conversation about, isn't that funny when they're at the store in Baltimore that they have to go to the counter and get the first set of cigarettes, like from, behind the counter. Like that's how they sell them here in the United States. They're not out on the regular shelves. But after they decide to pick through things, there's suddenly like stuff everywhere they can look at. And
I was thinking about that too. I just imagined that they had kind of wandered to like the back somehow. It doesn't really say.
Well, I just thought, given Philip K. Dick and his strange world, that maybe, and what you said about Half-Life, that maybe this is just like when you have a dream and things didn't totally make sense when you woke up and tried to tell your friends, but it made perfect sense to you when you were in the dream. Let's try something else because I don't think they're alive. That's what
something incredibly shocking happens and you're like, whatever. And then something unbelievably mundane happens and you're like, ah! So yeah, that's totally possible. So he realizes he has to leave to get the mail because he needs to get that free sample. The mailbox is gone, or the mail slot is gone, and then he kind of remembers mailboxes as a thing in the past. So he says, it's got to be on the ground floor. The door has managed to stick around. The door is very stubborn. 5 cents, please. Fortunately, he has some money, so he just gets through the door, no problem. It doesn't say which currency he pays with. The Ubik is in the form of a balm. It's full of poison. So I put all this up here. We don't have to read everything, but it's got oleander, so that's poison. Those are poisonous plants. It's got digitalis. That's like related to nightshade, I think. It's got
Oleander leaves.
Yeah, the oleander leaves. Is that what you said?
Oleander leaves are poison.
Yes. So basically, this is nothing that you would want to put into your body. It's also flammable. I know the word inflammable looks like it means not flammable, but it means it can be inflamed. So that's why it's like that. It's confusing. You should say unflammable if it's not flammable. Do not allow to get into eyes. Don't splash on skin. And it might result in habituation. In other words, it's addictive. He realizes he needs to get to the airport to hopefully get to Des Moines. And then he looks down the street and he sees at the curb the classic museum piece surface car, a LaSalle. He asks himself, can I get to Des Moines? Probably not. I should go to the airport instead. So he gets in the LaSalle. Turns out he has a key to it, just as he had a key to. Did I not put the. No, I did. That's what he finds. Sorry, this is what he finds in the mailbox. I should have said that. The sample. He goes to the airport and tries to arrange a flight, but all of his money is identified as funny money. They say, you can't charter anything with this. This is fake money or something. So he says, can I trade my car with somebody? And they say, hey, go ask this guy, Sandy Jesperson, or maybe Gal. So he goes to try to trade his car for a flight. But unfortunately, when the time to make that transaction comes about, the LaSalle has vanished. The LaSalle, by the way, was in perfect condition. This was another thing. Now we have a beat up old Ford Coupe, 1929, Model A. Nearly worthless. That also seems strange. Wouldn't somebody want to collect it? But I guess because of the time regression, these people are seeing that as not old enough to be a collector's item, but old enough to be worthless to them.
My friend who likes old cars got a Model A, and they don't have a lot of value, even though people are into old cars, because there's a lot of them to be had, but you can't get parts for them. There's certain people like my friend who kind of like it because it's so simple. You can make your own parts, but
Yeah.
they're not worth much even now.
Huh. Okay. Interesting. Well, I'll be cautious if someone tries to sell me one. He gets back to the sample, and the sample has further regressed into kind of a snake oil salesman's bottle. It says, Elixir of Ubik, guaranteed to restore lost manliness and banish all vapors of known kinds, as well as to relieve reproductive complaints in both men and women. A beneficent aid to mankind when sedulously employed, as indicated. And then a tiny print at the bottom. Don't do it, Joe. There's another way. Keep trying. You'll find it. He's being told not to take the Ubik. Again, contradictory information from presumably Runcitor. Yes, Vasilia?
It's like in contracts, document when you need to sign something.
Read the small print. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely a commitment once you swallow this stuff. Sedulous, as included by Ajit, marked by care and perseverance. So that is to say, diligent, really into it, put your back into it, keep doing it, don't give up, be steady, hold on. Tenacious, perhaps, would be a good one for sedulous. So they're saying sedulous use. In other words, you should use it, and you should use it at the same time every night in the same volume or the same dosage, I guess I should say. Runcitor, he realizes, still playing his cat and mouse games. So he's really suspicious now of Runcitor. God knows why he's doing this. Maybe he enjoys our torment. However, he put the bottle down and abandoned the idea of using it. So we don't get to see it in action just yet at the end of chapter 10. He's still too suspicious to consider taking it, especially, all those poisons in there, but it seems like he should be open to more things. Don't be so closed-minded, Joe. A lot's going on. You really need to think outside of the box. That box might be a coffin. Okay. Well, what a ride. Any questions or comments? Oh boy. Sorry, my daughter's in here with something in her hands. Okay, so next week, 11 to 13. And again, feel free to send along anything that you want to discuss ahead of time if you feel like doing so. I'm going to try to excerpt less because these are going way long. I'm maybe going to use more summary next time because I'm overdoing it with the excerpts. Sometimes it's really necessary. I especially like those moments of like musing and chewing things over that the characters do on occasion. So we'll still include those, but maybe I don't need to go with these step-by-step walkthroughs of the scenes. Okay. So in that case, it's been great. Hope to see you guys next Sunday.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good week.
Bye to everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.